The process of awakening on a spiritual level is not like a calm morning or a soft breeze. Everything that you always considered to be reality is shattered as a result of this earthquake, which is a silent implosion that starts from inside. You are not awakened by a smooth transition. Rather, you are wrenched away from the dream. One day, you are floating along with the tide of the world, and the next, you are gasping for oxygen, standing motionless as everything around you continues to make a whirling motion. At first, you're under the impression that there is something wrong with you. What is it about the world that makes it seem so loud, so artificial, and so disconnected? How come the things that you used to adore now leave you feeling empty? For what reason do the individuals who are closest to you feel so distant? That particular moment is not insanity. It is the cry that arouses consciousness from underneath. It was originally written by Carl Jung that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. However, in order to become who you genuinely are, you must first eliminate the person that you are not. It means allowing the fabricated identities, misconceptions, and roles that have been conditioned to be consumed by the flames of the truth. This fire is something that no one can prepare you for. There is no one who would tell you that awakening, the true kind of awakening, is not nothing but light and bliss and endless peace. Rather, it is the most brutal sort of honesty you will ever experience. It is the process of confronting every lie that you have told yourself, every wound that you have concealed under accomplishment, and every aspect of your insecurity that you have buried beneath performance. The truth, as well as the exposure to it, is confusing. When you go around a house that you have lived in for years and suddenly realize that every room is filled with the furnishings, ideas, and memories of someone else, it is as if you have no control over the situation. The walls need to be repainted, the furniture needs to be relocated, and you'll finally have to select what belongs and what does not belong in the space. Because it forces you to meet yourself for the first time and to accept that you never really knew who that was, not genuinely, not fully. That reconstruction is hard. It is also exhausting because it requires you to meet yourself. In addition, this fact may come off as a betrayal. Nevertheless, there is also freedom contained within that betrayal. You have never been the mask. You're not the mask. And the only reason that what is beneath the mask so terrible is because it is unrestricted. Freedom, on the other hand, feels like death before it feels like rebirth when you've lived your entire life in chains. Not the transitory kind of bewilderment that disappears after a good night's sleep, but the bone-deep, soul-rattling disorientation that breaks down the superstructure of everything you thought was real is the first dark side of spiritual awakening. This disorientation is the first sign that you are awakening to something greater than yourself. The experience is not a mistake or a setback. Rather, it is an initiation. It is a sacred disorientation. The landmarks of both your inner and outward world deteriorate one by one, and your internal compass begins to spin in an uncontrollable manner. As soon as you open your eyes, you are unable to identify your own thoughts. The principles that you formerly held in high regard start to feel foreign to you. The talks that you used to take pleasure in now feel empty. The profession that you have devoted your life to feels like a prison to you. You now feel as though the spiritual ideas that used to motivate you are like old clothing that no longer fit properly at all. Not all. This is a regression. There has not been a breakdown. It is a slashing away of things. In Jungian terminology, this is the development of the self, which is pressing against the fragile boundaries of the character that you have outgrown. When you were once content with the roles you played, your psyche is now rebelling against those roles. Truth is required by it. Authenticity is required for it. Also, that demand is really harsh. As time goes on, your dreams grow more vivid and filled with symbolism that you do not yet comprehend. The occurrence of synchronicities begins to flood your life, but rather of bringing you peace, they cause you to feel uneasy. They bring to your attention the fact that the universe is watching, listening, and responding, for which you are no longer certain that you are comfortable. The feeling that your life is no longer your own, as if you're being influenced by some unseen power, as if you were a puppet whose strings are now being pulled by the soul rather than the ego, is something that you are experiencing. And the ego puts up a fight. Panic ensues. It seeks predictability, routine, and anything else that will restore the illusion of control in order to satisfy its need for certainty. However, the first thing that is lost when one awakens is control. However, in its stead, you are left with nothing but silence. No, not the sort that is calm, but the kind that is loud. This is the kind of stillness that reverberates, which compels you to listen to the turmoil that exists within you. If you try to blank it out, run it, or bury in distractions, none of these strategies will work for an extended period of time. As soon as the self starts to become aware of its existence, there is no turning back. It desires for you to be complete. It wants you to be truthful. In addition, it will consume everything that stands in its way until you stop resisting and begin to attend to it. Confusion is not a sign of failure, but rather a necessary purging, similar to a fever that burns out the sickness, similar to a wildfire that clears dead timber from the forest. You begin to understand of this fact as you progress through the process. It is in the area of confusion that your previous identity begins to fade away and your authentic self begins to take root. Additionally, in that location, even though it may appear that you are disoriented, you are in fact being reborn. One of the negative aspects of awakening is the feeling of isolation. It is not the superficial loneliness that comes from missing a call or having an empty weekend. Rather, it is a profoundly painful separation from everything and everyone that you previously found familiar. To begin, it is subtle. When you were formerly participating in spirited conversations, you realize that you are now shrinking from them because they feel like theater. Even when you're seated at tables that are full of laughter and stories, something within you feels as though it is miles away and unexplored. The issues appear to be unimportant. It seems as though the opinions have been rehearsed. Additionally, the relationship that was previously simple now feels as like it was forced. This is not an example of arrogance. Bitterness is not the issue. It is not only depression. Awareness is the key. You're spotting the walls that are not visible. It is the hidden terror that lies underlying the words that you are hearing. You are observing the manner in which individuals compensate for their own lack of solitude by filling every moment with noise. There is no way to hide it. The time has come to stop pretending. And so, it is that you start to withdraw, not out of a sense of judgment, but rather out of necessity, out of a desire to protect yourself. Due to the fact that when your soul starts to speak, the volume of the world becomes extremely difficult to take. In the same way that someone who is drowning seeks air, you crave isolation. However, when you are by yourself, you discover that you are experiencing the pain of absence, the lack of belonging, the absence of understanding, and the absence of being fully seen. It's the paradox of finding oneself awake. Despite the fact that you feel more disconnected from the world, you grow more connected to life. The sacred is there in everything, but you are unable to articulate it to anybody else. I have a deep love for people, but I find it difficult to be around them. Isolation like this serves as the crucible. When you are in the wilderness, you will no longer feel the urge to belong to a tribe that does not comprehend your language. Furthermore, it is precisely in this holy seclusion that the germinating seeds of your genuine tribe start to take root. Not in an expedient or convenient manner, but in a natural order. You start to attract souls who see with the same eyes, who listen with the same depth, and who do not require you to diminish or translate whatever it is that you are feeling. And until then, you must learn to make peace with your own sense of isolation. Sitting with the silence and allowing it to teach you is something you learn, simply because quiet, when respected, transforms into a safe haven. You start to recall that disconnection is not the same thing as exile while you are in that refuge. Redirecting is what it is. If your spirit is unable to breathe in the spaces that you formerly considered to be your home, then this is the road that it will pursue. And even though it hurts, the loneliness also makes it more awake. A new form of relationship is created as a result of this. It is founded on essence rather than roles. One that is created on truth rather than familiarity. It is one that does not require an explanation, but rather provides presence. Additionally, the wait is well worth it since this kind of connection does not only fill the room, rather, it values the space. Pain is the third negative aspect of the awakening process. It is not a superficial ache, not the momentary sting of rejection or the anguish of a broken promise, but the raw, burning existential pain of being flayed open from the inside out. This is the suffering that you are experiencing instead. The agony that you are experiencing is not the result of something going wrong. Rather, it is the result of everything starting to become right. This is the dilemma that emerges. All of the aspects of your existence that are not in resonance with the truth begin to break apart as your soul begins to realign with the truth. Relationships that were constructed on the basis of deception start to falter. When jobs are pursued out of insecurity, they start to become suffocating. Those dreams that were borrowed from other people start to fail. And the reason it hurts is not because they were ever truly yours. Rather, it aches because you have wrapped your identity within them. It is as if you are losing yourself when you lose them. This loss, however, is grace disguised as a loss. Pain serves as the scalpel of the soul. Those things that are unable to follow you into the following chapter are eliminated. Additionally, despite the fact that it causes you to bleed, it also leaves you clean, awake, and stripped alive. It is then that you start to experience things that you have avoided for decades. The sadness that you have buried beneath your bustle, the humiliation that you have numbed with validation, and the loneliness that you have masked with your ambition. It is not to punish you that it comes back. Rather, it is to finally be seen, to be felt, and to be held. You now get what Jung meant when he remarked, "There is no coming to consciousness without one's experiencing pain." You have realized that awakening is not about freeing oneself from suffering. Discovering how to sit within it without flinching, how to feel it without running away, and how to observe it without connecting with it are all important skills to acquire. It dawns on you that the wound is not the adversary. Rather, it is the entrance. Moreover, in order to make it through it, you will need everything: patience, humility, and honesty. This anguish does not merely wish to be experienced. Rather, it desires to be transformed into something other. This is the holy mission of the soul that has been awakened: to transform sorrow into wisdom, to take the shattered pieces of your former self and shape them into. Your tears are not an indication of weakness, as you start to realize. The baptisms take place in salt water. You come to the realization that your trembling is not a defect in your character. In other words, it is proof that your heart is no longer numb and that you are alive to the full range of human experience. That being alive, despite the fact that it is painful, is holy. Your perception deepens as a result of the pain. Your perception of the world has improved, and you are able to recognize the beauty in the smile of a stranger, the tragedy in a busy street, and the yearning that is concealed in every conversation. Because it is your own, you experience the collective pain that humanity is experiencing as if it were your own. In the process of awakening, the illusion of separation is destroyed. You start to realize that your suffering is not distinct from that of others. It is a perfect example. It is the suffering that has been passed down through the generations, the scars that have been passed down via your family tree, the trauma that has been kept hidden from your culture, and the cries that have been forgotten by the collective unconscious. In addition, when you experience it, you are not only healing yourself, you are also mending the situation. These are the responsibilities that come with having a heart that has been awakened, to bear more than just your own sadness, and to continue to choose love, to continue to choose to create, and to continue to choose to show up even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. Because it is not the absence of suffering that is the mark of the awakened one, but rather the ability to hold it with grace that is the mark of the awakened one. You start to give your suffering to something that is more powerful. Not only do you sing and sing, but you also write and paint. It is not to run away from the wound, but rather to express it, to give it shape, and to honor the message it conveys. What it means to become a vessel, a bridge, or a transmitter is exactly what you just read. Rather of being merely a person who is navigating life, you have evolved into a soul that embodies truth. And the process of embodiment is not simple. A continual shedding, a constant listening, and a constant death to what is untrue are all necessary parts of the process in order to provide room for what is real to thrive. Additionally, during this process, you will learn from your misery. No longer does it control you. Rather, it teaches you discipline. Now, rather than squeezing you, it cuts you into pieces. It is not a hollow thing. Rather, it is a sacred thing that it carves out of you. It is a place where love can flourish, where compassion can flourish, and where wisdom can firmly establish itself. The alchemy of suffering is not to avoid it, but rather to enter it completely, to allow it to initiate you, and to allow it to transform you from the inside out rather than the other way around. You cease asking yourself, when will this come to an end, as you continue to go through the fire? And start by asking, what is it that I am learning from this? This change marks the beginning of your mastery of the subject. It is not control over other people, but rather mastery over your own shadow, your own suffering, and your own creation. Due to the fact that you have come to the realization that this route was never intended to be painless. Rather, it was intended to be purifying. In the process of purification, something that is ancient, something eternal, and something that cannot be broken is brought to life, the self. And that self, while having been born via fire, possesses the quiet strength of someone who has died many times but has still chosen to love again. The breakdown of one's existential identity is the fourth negative aspect of awakening. The kind that rips the floor out from under you and leaves you dangling in a void where nothing makes sense, not even the longing for meaning, is not the kind of poetry that you read in spiritual books. Rather, it is the kind that rips the floor out from under you. When you finally open your eyes, the questions come crashing down on you like a tsunami. To be honest, who am I? How come I am here? Why are we doing all of this? These musings are not merely idle curiosity. They are cries that come from the most profound part of your being, cries that demand answers not from a guru or a book, but rather from the eerie and silent space that resides deeper within you. As you take a glance around at your life, you become aware that you are a stranger in your own narrative. Suddenly, the roles you played, whether they were that of a child, parent, partner, or professional, felt like clothes in a theater production for which you did not initially audition. Every choice you've ever made, every identity you've ever had, and every belief you've ever acquired are all in question. It is not because they were incorrect. Rather, it is because they were not challenged. The investigation of an awakening is necessary. To answer the question, is this really me? It requires you to beam a light into every nook and cranny of your unconscious mind. The majority of the time, the response is no. The unraveling, the sacred dissolution, is taking place right now. It is the demise of the self that has been formed. In addition, just like every other death, it is a dirty, unpleasant, and perplexing experience. But it is also vital because the truth of who you are can only begin to emerge from the ashes of who you were before you decided to change. This is the point at which a lot of individuals begin to retreat. They cling to the convictions of the past. Attempting to bind themselves to identities that no longer fit them is something they do. But there is no way to go back. The illusion cannot be undone after it has been observed by the observer. In spite of your best efforts to resist it, the unraveling will continue. And the only way to get through this is to give up, to let go of the need to know, and to let go of the fantasy that you're meant to have everything worked out. In his writings, Jung frequently discussed the chaos that comes before individuation, which is the process of becoming entire. He was aware of the fact that in order to be complete, one must first be broken. To be able to remain, to sit in the uncertainty, and to live the questions without demanding answers, you need to discover the strength to remain in that brokenness. It is not a lack of action. Rather, it is faith. It is a belief in the more profound intellect of the soul. You have faith in the process of your own becoming unfolding. In spite of the fact that the process does not make any sense, you come to trust it. You learn to maintain an openness even when you feel the want to close down. In spite of the fact that everything in you wants to become more rigid, you learn to soften. This is due to the fact that you start to realize that the unwinding is not destruction, but rather revelation. Getting rid of everything that is not you is what it is all about. And what is left is not void. Rather, it is a holy portion of the earth, possibility of the birth of something new in the space. There is something genuine, something that is irrefutable. There is something that was constantly present, lingering in the background noise. Your authentic self, your self that is eternal. The part of oneself that does not require a name, a role, or a cause to exist. Simply put, it is, you start to feel at ease when you are in that state of being. It is not the tranquility that comes from knowing all the answers. Rather, it is the calm that comes from no longer having to have them. The fifth and last negative aspect of waking is spiritual hubris, which is a shadow that is the most alluring and subtle of all the shadows. When it does arrive, it does it stealthily, like a whisper disguised in wisdom. It is only after all of the smoldering, the crying, and the passing that you start to see. You start to realize it. The truths that have been concealed from you throughout your whole existence start to become clear to you. And the sensation is, due to the fact that it is. On the other hand, here is the risk. The ego does not perish when you awaken. Rather, it develops. By putting on robes, reciting mantras, and learning to quote Rumi, Jung, and the Bhagavad Gita, it becomes a spiritual being. The creature acquires the ability to smile calmly while discreetly passing judgment on others who have not yet awakened. It no longer has a desire for acclaim, but it does begin to yearn for recognition as someone who is no longer desperate for anything. Furthermore, if you are not careful, you may make the mistake of thinking that you have transcended your ego when, in reality, you have only veiled it in spirituality. Humility is the ultimate test that must be passed in order to awaken. This is not a case of performative humility or pretended modesty. Rather, it is a genuine and profound surrender to the mystery, to the realization that all knowledge is incomplete, that the more one delves into something, the less one becomes aware of it, and that enlightenment is not a destination, but rather a never-ending spiral staircase. As time goes on, you start to understand that the universe does not owe you enlightenment. Despite the fact that your ideas are delightful, they are not superior than the quiet of another individual. Despite the fact that your way is holy, it is not superior. For some people, awakening occurs at their own pace. For others, it is through adversity. For others, through grace. For some, via science. And for some, through dedication. Not a single one of them is incorrect. As soon as you have fully awakened, you will no longer have the desire to stir up other people. It is not that you preach the light. Rather, you are the light. You are not saving, but rather serving. As a result of the fact that you have learnt, often in a difficult way, that uninvited wisdom is really another type of control, and control is the opponent of awakening, you listen more than you speak. Consequently, you let go of the urge to be correct. You're able to let go of the drive to be unique. Rather of attempting to be the lighthouse, you choose to become the peaceful shore that provides space for others to find their own way. You stop feeling the need to impress the divine and begin living as if the divine is present in everything, including the things that irritate you, scare you, or cause your wounds to be triggered. This includes the individuals who have not yet grasped the concept, as well as the aspects of oneself that are currently having difficulty. True spiritual maturity is characterized by the presence of profound compassion rather than perfection or serenity and tranquility that lasts forever. Compassion that does not attempt to treat or cure. Compassion that does not isolating itself. Compassionate understanding that recognizes that everyone is carrying something that cannot be seen. Every person is traveling on a path that you cannot see. In addition, there are times when the people who appear to be the most far from awakening are actually the ones whose spirits are engaged in the most profound work behind the scenes. Because of their humanity, you start to hold other people in high regard, not because they are right, but because they are human. You start to maintain the same posture toward yourself. And by doing so, you dispel the ultimate delusion that awakening transforms you into a better person. That is not the case. It forces you to be truthful. It makes you more pliable. You will be able to see. Furthermore, when you actually see, you are unable to look down on anyone because you identify yourself in them. You are aware of your prior selves, in addition to yourself that are now struggling. As you bow down, you submit yourself to the chaos, and homage is paid to the enigma. In a world that was designed to keep people asleep, you kneel down to the marvel that anyone wakes up at all by any means. In addition, this is the point at which the journey comes full circle. As you go back out into the world, rather than being outside of it, it is within you. In spite of the fact that you have new eyes, your heart continues to beat. A heart that has been shattered into pieces and is stuffed with something that cannot be expressed in words. There is a presence, a serenity, and a love that does not ask for anything and accepts everything. The proof that you have awakened is no longer required of you. It's evidenced by your life. Your existence is evidence of that. The manner in which you breathe yourself through a dispute, the manner in which you talk when no one is listening, the manner in which you sit with those who are in pain without the desire to fix them, the manner in which you laugh, the manner in which you cry, and the manner in which you hold space for yourself and others. Exactly, this is the fruit that comes with awakening. It is not enlightenment or supremacy that is sought, but rather closeness to the truth. An intimacy that is so profound, so unfiltered, and so hushed that it becomes infectious. That, in fact, is the irony. The awakened do not make any attempt to awaken anyone else in the end. Simply put, they conduct their lives in such a way that others are unable to help but feel secure enough to find themselves awake in their presence. If you have made it this far through the separation, the agony, the unraveling, and the humility, then you are not broken. You have persevered through all of these different things. Your initiation is about to begin. Additionally, each scar that you bear is a holy reminder that you made the decision to see when it would have been easier for you to remain blind. You decided to feel when it would have been more prudent to remain numb. At a time when it was easier to simply survive, you made the decision to become. And it is precisely this choice, that holy, terrible, and daring choice, that not only awakens you, but also awakens you in a way that is continually developing, still deepening, and still discovering. And may there be no end to it. For the reason that the moment you start to believe that you have arrived, you stop progressing. Maintain your gentleness, your curiosity, and your rootedness in the mystery. And allow your behavior, and not your words, to be the silent revolution that transforms suffering into insight, separation into connection, and awakening into